So I'm more than happy to introduce our next presentation, rather our first presentation, which will be done by Darcy Williams, a dear friend of mine. Now, Darcy currently works as a program officer at UNICEF headquarters based in New York City. And in this capacity, he supports UNICEF's new and rapidly growing portfolio on the prevention of childhood obesity and childhood overweight and obesity in low and middle income countries, with a special focus on youth engagement in food system transformation. Now, prior to this, or prior to UNICEF, Darcy spent several years living abroad and co-designing, implementing, and evaluating community health programs across Senegal, Cameroon, Kenya, and Nepal. He holds an MPP in Global Health Policy from the University of Cambridge, where he studies as a Gates Cambridge Scholar, and an honors BA in International Development Studies from McGill University. So he is more than qualified to speak about this topic. And I'm really happy to see this rights focus lens to this discussion. So Darcy, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Pierre. And I think, well, it's always an honor to be introduced by you out of all people. So yeah, really happy to be here. Just making sure everyone can see my screen and junk food moving, right? The video is working. Okay, awesome. So good morning, everyone. My name is Darcy Williams. I'm a program officer at UNICEF HQ, where I work on the prevention of childhood overweight obesity, as Pierre said. I have a specific passion and focus on youth engagement in food system transformation. And so just a quick shout out to all the amazing co-hosts today for the invite. It's really a pleasure to be speaking alongside some superb colleagues. So my main goal today is to set the stage for our conversation around why the marketing of junk food to children is wreaking havoc on their health and why it is a child rights nightmare. And hopefully it will leave you angry and yet activated to make change, because I really love speaking with engaged young people, because there's no stronger advocate for change than an informed young person speaking from their lived experience. So before we start, just never forget that. So I want to delve into a little bit of history before we get too far along this path, because it's important to know where we're coming from. But I wanted to root my presentation in relevant UNICEF history. So in 1999, UNICEF's Deputy Executive Director, Stephen Lewis, who is a dear friend and mentor of mine, said the following statement about the marketing of breast milk substitutes. Those who make claims about infant formula that intentionally undermine women's confidence in breastfeeding are not to be regarded as clever entrepreneurs just doing their job, but they're to be considered as some of the worst human rights violators in history. And it's interesting because 20 years later, this fight is still raging on. This week, UNICEF and WHO just released a damning report regarding the continued illegal tactics of this $55 billion industry to market infant formula. But today in 2022, this fight now includes the marketing of unhealthy food and beverage in a new digital age. Corporations and their clever entrepreneurs are intentionally misleading young people and caregivers around the dangerous health consequences of junk food. And it's a total and utter violation of children's rights. So a good place, this brings us to a good place to begin today's conversation, where the main problem that brings me today is that child obesity is exploding, and it's exploding everywhere. It's being driven by this rise of unhealthy food environments, which makes it way too hard for young people to get the healthy and nutritious options that they deserve. We know that there are over 380 million children and adolescents around the world who are now living with overweight obesity, and 75% of these kids are living in low and middle income countries. And this crisis is being fueled by the marketing of junk food. And in 2016, the WHO Commission of Ending Childhood Obesity said that there's unequivocal evidence that the marketing of unhealthy foods and drinks is related to childhood obesity. And I know some other colleagues today will speak to exactly how that works from a psychology perspective. But just to flag, children in low and middle income countries are now even more vulnerable to this type of marketing, because junk food companies are pivoting their marketing strategies and budgets to emerging markets, just like the tobacco industry did. And so how does this work? And what makes this marketing happen? And I think we all have a good idea, but we know that kids are exposed to these techniques from day one. We know that the nag factor has been found to be a key driver of families' food purchases. And basically, we just know that it pays off for a company to convince young kids early age to obsess over their product. And we know that TV is important for marketing, but now this is really changing and expanding. And so we have from radio to podcasts to billboards to retail to schools to in-product placements on media, sports, branded toys, God forbid, YouTube child influencers. But now the real game is really about digital marketing, the online games, the website ads, the social media. Young people are always online, always connected, and companies rely on this to get their products in front of children's eyes. So I want to do a quick exercise in our chat box. So if everyone can open the chat, I want to ask a quick question. What was the last junk food advertisement you saw? When did you see it? What product was it? Please do not put the brand name. We're not going to give them extra sponsorship here. And where do you see it? So for example, I will say, okay, shout out Bite Back. I'll say that I saw a triple dip fried chicken yesterday on my Instagram. So I would like to hear, just if people could just pop some examples into the chat box, that would be great. Anyone? Butter chicken burger in the newspaper. That's fabulous. These, yeah, double cheeseburger, fried chicken on IG. See, it's everywhere. And yeah, chicken bucket on TikTok. That's a great one. Yeah, it's quite pervasive as we can see, and it's quite depressing actually. But all of your experiences are valid, and you're not the only ones who are dealing with it. And this is why there have been global calls to restrict junk food marketing to children for ages now. In 2010, the 63rd WHA unanimously endorsed this set of recommendations of the marketing of foods and non-alcoholic beverages to children. This specifically recognized that a significant amount of marketing around the world is for foods that are high in fat, sugars, and salt, and this was a huge risk to children's health. However, 6 years later, the WHO Commission on Ending Childhood Obesity highlighted the complete failure of member states to seriously implement any of these recommendations. And it also recognized new ways in which this marketing had evolved. And so not only are there international resolutions that unequivocally call for countries to restrict corporations' ability to market their junk to kids, there are also legal frameworks that Pierre alluded to that we need to also hold up. And this is where a child rights approach comes in. So back in 2018, UNICEF published this document, A Child Rights-Based Approach to Food Marketing, a guide for policymakers. The Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history, is highly relevant to junk food marketing to children. The marketing threatens children's rights, and governments who have ratified the CRC actually have a legal obligation to ensure that the best interests of the child are the primary consideration in all actions concerning them. And they need to be taking all available measures to make sure children's rights are respected, protected, and fulfilled. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child even noted that food industry spends billions on persistent and pervasive marketing strategies to promote junk food to kids, and they have called for such marketing to be regulated. So this really allows us to harness a child rights approach to combating exploitative marketing techniques and demand governments protect children from the negative impacts of junk food marketing. As some of you might already know, a child rights approach identifies children as rights holders and governments as corresponding duty bearers. So again, open up your chat box because I'm going to ask you another question. Out of interest, can you guys guess which specific child rights are violated by unhealthy junk food marketing? And then drop them in the chat before I go to the next slide. Right to health, right to health, right to health, right to privacy. Yep, I figured you guys would be a group of experts by now. So you guys are all spot on. There are more than 8 major rights that UNICEF has identified, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to refer to 3. Like you guys said, right to health. This is not only protected in Article 24 of the CRC, but also enshrined in other international agreements like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This calls for the need to undertake the appropriate measures that reduce infant and child mortality and to combat disease and malnutrition through the provision of adequate nutritious foods. More specifically, the need to address the impacts of unhealthy food marketing to children is explicitly addressed in the CRC General Comment number 16, and it's just all pointing to how junk food marketing directly threatens kids' right to healthy futures. The second one is right to food, which, as I just said, is also in Article 24. But this really is highlighting children's need to information on the aspects of all health education to enable them to make informed choices regarding lifestyle, including healthy eating and physical activity. Marketing inhibits this. And finally, right to privacy. This one is huge and protected in Article number 16, where no child should be subjected to interference with their privacy. We know that children are the most coveted demographic in the digital marketing space, and companies exploit the way children use the internet all the time. And we need to ensure their right to participate in a digital environment does not depend on being exposed to unhealthy food marketing or exploitation or the inappropriate acquisition of their data. Imagine what this means for things like the metaverse. It's wild and it's scary, and we haven't figured out how to control it yet. And so finally, I want to just point out, to wrap up this presentation, why you all as youth advocates should care about this. Well, it is an issue directly impacting you. Corporations are making hella profits off of your health, and governments are prioritizing corporate wealth over your health. Just like fossil fuel corporations profiting off of the expense of our future, junk food marketing is at a similar level of gross exploitation of our rights. You should care because you can change it. And in fact, you're the only ones who can change it. Look at the powerful examples of youth advocacy around the world, from Barbados to the UK. So the question is, how do you change it? So first, you advocate from a position of lived experience. It's the most powerful advocacy tool someone has. There's no more powerful voice than a young person speaking truth to power. Second, adding a child rights angle to this lived experience advocacy forms a lethal combination. Come with your receipts. Your governments are duty bearers of these rights. Don't let them forget it. And make policymakers feel how it's affecting you, and make them really hear you, and make sure the world sees you telling them, which keeps them accountable. And finally, ask the hard questions like, do you care more about junk food companies' profits over whether I have a right to be free from corporate exploitation? Because speaking truth to power is a wonderful thing. The rest of us, from UN agencies to civil society, need youth voices to push these conversations, to sometimes say the things we cannot. So in advance, I thank you all, because I feel content knowing that you will take our chat today onwards on your advocacy journeys. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Darcy. I really love how you started it off, especially making that point that, you know, it's not to pat the creative, I guess, PRO or PR person on the back for these really nice and fancy ads, but it's also to condemn them for the predatory marketing tactics that they're implementing, and understanding that this is very much against the rights of children. And even I today learned for the first time that this goes beyond the right to health and the right to privacy, but continues into the right to education and several other factors under the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So thank you very much for presenting that to us.